To Dr. Blackmon to introduce himself in his presentation.
Thank you, Diane. Hello, everyone. Welcome again. My name is Willie Blackmon. And so today we're going to talk about do I belong here and navigating the imposter phenomenon, right? We have a small group, so this can be interactive. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, as well as feel free to unmute yourself and let's really take a deep dive into the imposter phenomenon, okay? So in addressing the imposter phenomenon, some things that imposters say, right, is I feel like an imposter here with all of these really bright people. If I'm so successful, why do I feel like a fake? Obviously, I'm in this position because my abilities have been overestimated, and my family expects me to make some massive impact upon this world, and I live in constant fear of disappointing them. Okay. And so the reason I call it the imposter phenomenon, right, is when we talk about the imposter syndrome, so many folks look to figure out what is the cure? How do I fix it? Where the imposter phenomenon is more situational, it's based off of experiences, right? The novelty of different things. Okay. So a bit about myself. I graduated from UCR for my undergrad. I then did my master's at the University of San Diego, and I did my doctorate out of Drexel University in educational management and leadership, where my dissertation was on the imposter phenomenon for more specifically Mexican American and African American students attending, first generation students attending predominantly white institutions. Okay. And so that's where the passion comes from, and really trying to understand my own experience and not being able to, or being fearful of, can I repeat my successes, right? So I show you here that I was able to get through my bachelor's program, my master's program. But in each one of these programs that I went into, although I was successful in completion, there was this doubt that I experienced of, will I be able to successfully complete this again? Can I duplicate what I've already done? Right. And that's where the imposter phenomenon really stems from. So today we're going to define the imposter phenomenon. We're going to detail some characteristics of the imposter phenomenon, introduce the 5 types of imposters. And so I'm really excited and ready to hear which one you identify with the most. Keep in mind, they're very fluid. What's your imposter story, right? So I call it impostery. What's your impostery? We all have one. And how to cope with imposter feelings and receiving compliments and reframing those negative thoughts. And that's how we'll wrap it up. Obviously, you see here in the objectives, I don't talk about how do we conquer, but really how do we navigate and how do we cope with these feelings that that surface. So let's define the imposter phenomenon. It's an intense feeling of intellectual inauthenticity that is frequently experienced by high-achieving individuals. And I want to say that again, high-achieving individuals. We have established ourselves in our fields. We have conquered whatever it is that we needed to conquer. We have been very successful. But then we start to question our own success. We start to question the merit. Did I get this out of luck? Did they give me the job because of insert whatever it is we tell ourselves to really take away from the things that we have worked so hard to achieve, okay, and our own merit. So how does the imposter phenomenon show up? Okay, it's a brutal cycle of apprehension and short-term relief. And there's this fear of failure here, okay? And I've talked about that since we initially started, this fear of failure of, can I repeat success? There's this incessant need to be perfect. And I talk about this, and if you think about learning something new, imposters usually experience analysis paralysis of, I need to overanalyze this, and that then stops us from moving, which then goes on to a form of procrastination, being overly conscious, so conscientiousness of our work, reluctant to adopt positive feedback and criticism, this is a huge one because if people are like, oh my gosh, you did a great job, an imposter would say, oh, thanks, but. And maybe you don't even say thank you. It's, okay, I could have done this better, or I should have done this, if only, as opposed to actually taking time to hear what is being said. A fear of success and achievement. Because if we are successful, can we repeat that success? Okay, so there's that fear that comes in, and then of course there's a lack of self-confidence, and um, that is the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories that have been told to us about us, and that is a big piece. And I want to say that again: the stories that have been told to us about us. And I really want you all to take some time to reflect as we're going through that about the stories that have been told to you about you. So why identify the phenomenon? Why are we even talking about it? And why is this something that we should be conscious of? It really helps with the overall stress if you can identify what you're going through when you're going through it. It helps limit the physical and emotional manifestations that we may experience when dealing with the imposter phenomenon. It helps address the relationship problems and issues that ultimately may surface, which can be a breakdown in communication. Maybe you start to be very snappy. Maybe you're doing group work, and when you're experiencing the imposter phenomenon, like myself, and you're doing group work, you want to be the person that controls every aspect of the project. Okay. An absence of personal and professional gratification. So then maybe you just start to feel empty because you don't know why you're feeling this way. And so we identify the phenomenon to help us aid in identifying the voice that surfaces. Currently, I'm the interim dean at Crafton Hills College. And being an interim dean here, I've been interviewing for this role for 7 months. And keyword interim. And there have been times where that voice will creep in of like, when I apply for this full-time gig, am I going to be good enough? Have I been able to do everything that they needed me to do? And at certain points in this 7 months, there's been an emptiness that has surfaced. And a huge piece of the imposter phenomenon is the ability to sit and allow yourselves to be vulnerable. And then, of course, it helps us identify the unreached potential, because what limitations are we putting on ourselves, and what opportunities, what doors are we closing because of the imposter voice saying, you can't do this? Okay, so that's why we identify the phenomenon, to address all of these issues and be able to identify that voice, hear that voice for what it is, and be able to allow ourselves to step outside of our comfort zones. So imposter phenomenon influences. Really, it can stem from early family guidance, so outlook about success and failure, and myths and labels. Okay, this is huge. Outlook about success and failure for me growing up was my parents would say, did you try your best? And knowing that in most cases I didn't, I would just say yes. And they go, well, that's all we ask. But they were okay that I got a D. But when I did try my best, and let's say I did get a C, right? I would say, no, but I could have done better. So again, it's those pieces. Myths and labels. I come from a family where my dad is a former Marine, former police officer. My mom was a nurse. And for me, it was always taught like, you don't necessarily need to go into education. You need to find a trade and you need to go into work. So it was immediately, you have to get out there and you have to take care of your family, get a job. School's going to have to be put on the back burner. And with that, I always thought, oh my gosh, I'm wasting 4 years in undergrad. I'm wasting time. And then once I graduated with a sociology degree, the first thing my dad said to me was, what job are you going to get with that? And those are some of the bits and pieces that I took from that. Novelty of the situation. So are you experiencing new? Are you in a new role? Are you in a new position? What is new, right? And that's when some of the imposter phenomenon influences surfaces. Judgment to follow an alternative path. So for instance, maybe you identify as a woman, you want to go into STEM, but they say, oh, women don't do that, right? This group doesn't do this. And so you feel like I have to follow a certain path because they're saying that insert X identity has to go over here, right? Responsibility to represent an ascribed identity, right? And the limited diversity in these areas. And again, that goes back to historically marginalized groups and the limitations that have been placed, but we feel a calling to have to go and be represented in said occupation or space to be represented. And then, of course, unaccommodating structural cultures, right? So competition, hostility, like what does that look like in your family and when you were growing up, right? And where did that come from? So characteristics of the imposter phenomenon are self-doubt, a sense of incompetence, frequently comparing yourself to others, guilt about success, difficulty accepting compliments, fear and anxiety, immobility. That's that analysis paralysis that we were talking about. A skewed definition of intelligence, right? So you're smart, you're in the space, you're at the table, but then you start questioning and looking around. Well, why does that person get it, but I don't? Why did they get an A, but I didn't? Right? And you start to compare, you start to foster um, uh, negative storytelling, right? About their experience versus your own. And then false and non-affirming family messages. And again, those are the messages and the stories that we received about us to us. So an explanation for success. Usually when experiencing the imposter phenomenon and folks are successful, they usually say it was luck or timing. You know, I was in the right place at the right time. That's why I got this interim role. Oh, I lucked out and that's why I got an A. I lucked out. That's why I got the job. I didn't interview my best, but that's why I got it. Oh, that interview was easy. That test was easy. So the simplicity of the task, right? And instead of allowing yourself to say, I did this, I got this, right? And your own merit. Others help or low expectations, right? Oh, I got it because of who I knew. And that's why, right? A computer error. I've heard many students say this. I got into this institution, it must have been an error. I got into this institution because of this. I don't know how I got an interview. It must have been a computer error. Oh my gosh, I'm extremely nice. People love me. They like me. I'm charismatic. That's why I got this gig, right? Or any other excuses you can imagine. And so those are some of the things that when you experience the imposter phenomenon, those are some of the explanations for success. I see that there's something in the chat. Is there? Let's see. Oh, no, just, okay. Does anybody have any questions before I go on? And feel free to interrupt. No questions? Okay. And so there are 5 types of imposters, okay? And we're going to talk about the perfectionist, the natural genius, the soloist, the expert, and the superhuman. Keep in mind, these are all fluid, and we play very different types of imposters and roles, depending, and it's situational. So while I may be a perfectionist at work, maybe in my personal life, I play the superhuman, right? As well as relationships, right? Where do you fall in certain relationships? So I'm going to introduce you to these 5 types of imposters, and we'll go from there. So the perfectionist, right? This is someone who sets those extremely high standards. They create a cycle where their best will never be good enough. They have a specific vision and accomplishment, and they want to make sure everyone knows about this accomplishment, their vision, and how they're moving forward. They cannot be derailed, okay? Believes there is a right and a wrong way to proceed, and they will continue to challenge because they want to ensure that as long as they're facilitating, they're coordinating, they are moving forward with their direction, okay? And they have a greater sense of self-worth in others' eyes. So people tend to hold them at high regard and look at them as the information holders, right? These are the people that you go to when you want to know a little something about everything, okay? And they have this do-it-yourself attitude, but what comes with this is severe trust issues. an inability to let go, an inability to be that team player, and an inability to actually just take some time and listen, right? And so that's how the perfectionist shows up when navigating the imposter phenomenon. Then there's the natural genius. The natural genius, they naturally set the bar high and they leave little to no room for error. Okay. They strive to master any new skill quickly with little effort, but they do this with over preparation. So they're working late hours. They're up until 2 a.m., making sure they study for this exam. They're putting everything that they have into this program, into this task. They're genuinely optimistic about timeframes, tasks, and projects. However, there's severe disappointment when the timeline is not met. Okay, so then they start to say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I missed this deadline." Right? There's some panic that sets in there. Some setbacks that throw them off is they avoid taking risks, and there's a severe fear of failure. So if you ask a natural genius to try something new, chances are they probably won't. If you do come to them and you ask them to try something new, they need to add this to their timeline before moving forward. So it would need it to be added to their timeline. They would need to go back and learn about this process before they can actually themselves move forward and feel okay with moving forward. Then we have the soloist. They see competence as being able to do something on their own. Achievement only comes if it's unassisted. And I want to pause there because I find myself in many situations being the soloist, because that means that I don't have to rely on other people. And if I rely on myself, then I'm okay. I'm okay, right? But if I have to rely on other people for a task to be done, or for something to ultimately, for something to be successful, chances are I would want to take over. They typically reject assistance to establish a sense of self-worth, which is, again, very true. They value independence over everything, right? Especially their own needs. And this could ultimately lead to procrastination. And this is what I mentioned earlier around analysis paralysis. With a soloist biting off more than they can chew, ensuring that they are dotting I's and crossing T's, but where's the movement? Okay. And asking for assistance can be seen as a symbol of weakness. And that's the last thing a soloist would want you to see, especially if experiencing the imposter phenomenon, because that means that you, in essence, could be seen as fraudulent or not able to fully complete the task or job on your own, right? And they believe, again, it reveals a sense of incompetence. So in looking at the ones that we have gone over thus far, we've looked at 3. Does any of the 3 resonate with anyone? Feel free to put it in the chat or feel free to unmute yourselves. I'm seeing perfectionist at times, perfectionist. Awesome, thank you. All right, and then we have the expert. The expert believes competence means knowing absolutely everything and the need to understand and comprehend all tasks prior to the start. So the expert wants to know, very different from the perfectionist, go hand in hand with the soloist. The expert believes in, I need to know your role, I need to know my role, I need to know their role, I need to know every aspect of what is taking place before we can ultimately move forward, right? The need infinitely seeks out more information, okay? But again, this is disguised for procrastination. So an expert only moves when they feel that they know everything that can go wrong, they have predicted what is going to happen next, and then they move on. There's little to no room for error. But in doing so, it's disguised as a form of procrastination because there's a fear to move there, right? And hunt for new information gets in the way of completing the tasks and projects. So in essence, the expert never really ends up being the perfectionist because they've taken so much time trying to learn A through Z that there was little to no movement or action that has taken place. And the superhuman. These are the folks that push themselves to work harder than everybody else. They measure competence based on how many roles they can both juggle and excel in. And so these are the people who have meetings to have another meeting that has a committee meeting, and then they have to go to class, and then they went to their other job, the second job, then they're going to a wedding, and you have to stop and say, why are you doing all of these things? And they believe they can fulfill all the roles they carry with perfection and ease. They excel in all of these areas because of overcommitment, but this is where burnout happens. These are the folks where you're like, I don't know how you do everything that you do. But when they're alone and they allow themselves to sit with their thoughts and truly process what is happening and what they're feeling, that's where the burnout happens. They're addicted to the validation that comes with hard work. And so it's, oh my gosh, you did so great. You did this. And so it's that continuous cycle that perpetuates, right? Of I have to continue to do 110 in order to achieve the same standard because that's what they expect from me, right? So these are the people who are giving 110 on 10 to 15 projects as opposed to prioritization, right? So maybe I'll give 100 here, but I need to do 70 here. But then once this is done, I can, right? No, these are 110 all the time, go. And there's an inability to say no. So they're always going to say yes. They're always going to overcommit, and they're going to put their best foot forward at all times because they're addicted. And I want to say that again, because they're addicted to the constant validation and affirmation that they receive from these successes. And that in itself is a form of the imposter phenomenon. So let's look at the imposter phenomenon. We've talked about it, okay? We've talked about it. We've identified the 5. Now let's look at this cycle, okay? And so I want to have you all look where it says the imposter cycle. Look right under it. It says project or piece of work. Let's say we are planning a program, okay? We get the program and we got it in front of us. Initially, the imposter phenomenon goes into anxiety, self-doubt, and worry. I don't know if I'm going to do this on time. I don't know if I have the budget. Are people going to show up? Are they going to like it? Are they going to like me? How am I going to be perceived? How are they going to receive this program? And then we can navigate it in 2 different ways, right? We either do over preparation or we go into procrastination, okay? And then with over preparation and procrastination, there's always an accomplishment. And I want to stress that there's always an accomplishment because as an imposter, we fear that we're going to be exposed. So we always put our best foot forward, but it just depends on what it looks like. We either over prep or we procrastinate, but we get it done. Okay. So the accomplishment, and with the accomplishment, there's a feeling of relief, but take a look over preparation, right? We put in all of the effort. And then take a look at procrastination. Let's say we did it the night before. Then we're like, oh my gosh, we based it on luck. Look at the dashes, right? We based it on luck. So there's this feeling of relief. We receive positive feedback. We push it away. We ignore that was a great program. We loved you. This was great. You're amazing. And we're like, it's over, right? We did it. And then we start feeling like a fake and self-doubt and maybe even starting to experience depression and anxiety of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I cut it that close. I can't believe it. I lucked out. Oh my gosh, this was right. And we start to have it all over again. And it just perpetuates. It's a cycle. And the cycle surfaces at, again, the novelty. This imposter phenomenon normally surfaces in historically marginalized groups. So women, people of color tend to experience more along the lines of the imposter phenomenon. And that's not to say that our other groups don't experience the imposter phenomenon. It just surfaces differently. What you're looking at in this cycle really touches on our historically marginalized groups and how we navigate the cycle. And it's this ongoing vicious cycle, which is why it's not a syndrome, because there's no cure. It's really situational and based on the experiences that we tap into. So now I know people have been relatively quiet. I'm going to ask that you unmute yourselves and really take some time to think about what you're impostoring. Identify a time that you felt fraudulent. What did you attribute to that success? Which strengths of yours were you overlooking? Okay. And how did you process that initially? And what would you have done differently? These are a lot of questions, and I'm not looking for you to touch on every single one of them, but I wanted to ensure that I put all of these questions here. And yes, that would be great if we could pause so folks could share out if they'd like. So then this is not recorded. That would be great. All right, so thank you for those that have shared your impostery. We're going to go ahead and move on, and we're going to talk about ways to address the imposter phenomenon. And notice that I didn't use the word conquer. I did not say eliminate, because this, again, is very fluid and something that continues to surface and will continue to surface. But it's all about how we cope and how we navigate the imposter phenomenon. And having you share your impostery is breaking the silence. And as I mentioned, when you hear yourself say these things out loud, when you give that name, that imposter voice, a name and an actual physical voice from outside of your head, from your mouth into the universe, you hear some of the things that I'm not worthy. Why am I here? And you really start to think, wait, that sounds crazy, right? Why am I telling myself those stories? Separate feelings from fact. I always like to say that because our feelings are very much valid because they're ours, right? I feel X. They're yours. You own your feelings. But just because they're your feelings doesn't make them fact. When I walk into a space, I feel inadequate. But the fact of the matter is I'm there based off of my own merit and what I've done to get here thus far. So that negates, in this case, my feelings. But I want to understand, I want us all to understand that there's duality there, right? You can navigate that feeling and still be able to be in the space. So separate feelings from fact. Recognize when you should feel fraudulent. Now, there are times where people will come in my office and ask me questions that I have no clue. And I'm okay with saying I don't know. I'm okay with saying, let me look into it and let me get back to you. Because that's extremely new, right? It's a novelty. So that's when we should be okay with being okay with feeling fraudulent, because they're asking something of me and they're asking me to do something that I've never done before. But the times where we have done something and we were successful, we can and should continue to recreate success and be okay with not feeling like we cannot repeat success, right? Accentuate the positive. So we dwell on the negative. I hear so many times where people say, I did this program, but only 5 students showed up. Quality versus quantity, right? That is a big piece. And the people who showed up are the folks that needed to be there and needed to hear what you had to say and needed to experience said program. Develop a new response to failure and mistake making. Mine is, of course. And I say that because that is my new go-to when something goes wrong, when I was supposed to, I'm like, of course it did. Of course. And I've taken this approach to be a bit more lighthearted than instead of beating up on myself. I'm an emotional eater as well. Okay. So when I'm stressed out, I go all in. I need a nacho, I need a carne asada fry, I need something to help me feel a little better. And then, but when I take this attitude of course, and I take time to reflect on what I could have done or what I could have done better instead of beating myself up about it, I then don't turn to that emotional support, in my case, food, right? Visualize success. I visualize myself succeeding more times than not. I'm like, I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna kill it. I got this. I've done this. I have conversations with myself. People probably think I'm crazy, but I'm pumping myself up the whole time. You are your own personal cheerleader. And I tell people that all the time. Be okay with singing your praises. Be okay with acknowledging and affirming yourself in these spaces and eliminating some of that self-doubt and self-talk, the depreciating self-talk, right? And reward yourself. Reward yourself. Now, again, for me, emotional eater, when you're sad, you eat, you're happy, you eat, you're bored, you eat. So for me, a reward is a cookie. Okay? I'm over here living my best life. But it's one of those things where reward yourself with what it is for you. Okay? Reward yourself when you're able to address the imposter phenomenon. And stop asking for permission. And this goes back to some of the stories that were shared when we took a little break. And I'm not going to reiterate them here. But what I will say is stop asking for permission to take up space. If you're at the table, your voice is just as valid. You're equally at the space as a key stakeholder. So stop asking for permission and move. Okay? And be cognizant of your words. A lot of times we hear, oh, I should. So instead of saying should, it would be good if, because should is definitive, right? It's this definite. It is, I should do this. And people are like, you should go. No, it would be good if I got that email out at 5, right? As opposed to I should send it out at 5, because then we have placed this hard deadline, right? It would be good if I got it out at 5. But what is the worst thing that could happen if the email didn't go at 5, right? I must do this. I have to do this, right? I would like to. I have the opportunity to, right? I will do X. I will try to do X. And that the reason, if you look at the words on the right side of your screen, would be good if, would like to, have the opportunity to, and will try, that really opens us up to this open-ended response of whatever the universe is going to, whatever's going to happen in the universe, I'm willing to receive. The other side, it is these hard definites that we try to navigate and operate within the confines of, and ultimately set ourselves up for failure when things don't go our way, right? So let's try to be cognizant of our words. And so with the imposter phenomenon action checklist, right? These are some things that I would just recommend for us all to do. And I personally do them. And so I have a personal affirmation statement, right? That I look at daily. And this helps me establish a growth mindset. And I highly recommend that you write a personal affirmation statement. And I'll share with you, my affirmation statement is not to be at the highest level in higher education. It's not to strive to do XYZ. Literally, my personal affirmation statement is, today I'm going to have a good day. And then I've defined what a good day looks like for me. Okay. And that helped me establish this growth mindset without going into worrying about meetings, worrying about, am I going to meet this deadline? What do I have to do next, right? We all talk about the Sunday night scaries, right? Going into Monday, this growth mindset of what does a good day look like for me? And I read that. It's on my mirror in my bathroom. I'm going to have a good day. And then I personally define what a good day looks like for me. Okay. Request personal and professional feedback. Write it down, good or bad. And I say this because when you write it down, that helps us own it. That actually helps us hear it. That helps us process it. And really practice accepting it. For so long, folks would say, oh my gosh, Willie, you're a great personal speaker. I hate personal speaking. I have public speaking. I don't, but then I was like, I'm a talker. I'm good at talking. But when it comes to public speaking, sometimes I just didn't necessarily want to do it. But I took the time to write that down, started accepting it, started practicing more. And I was like, I really enjoy this. I like it, right? So maybe some of your weaknesses will become strengths, and some of your strengths will only get stronger. Okay. So I always like to say, with accepting some of this professional feedback, the goal is to weaken your weaknesses. And then practice saying thank you after receiving feedback and sit with it. You're amazing. Thank you. Oh my gosh, that program was great. Thank you. Don't qualify. No need to do that. Okay. And then set realistic, attainable expectations. So stop the grandiose, I'm going to do this. I have a saying, sure you heard it before. I underpromise and I overdeliver. But the imposters, especially our perfectionists, they like to overpromise, underdeliver. Then we have the superhumans who overpromise, overdeliver, but that's not sustainable. Okay, so set realistic, attainable expectations. And do you have any questions for me?
I do have one question.
Yeah.
One of your bullets said,
Uh-oh, I think she got cut off. Well, while we're waiting for Robin to reconnect, does anybody else have any other questions? All right, Robin, you're back.
Oh, good. One of the questions, one of your bullets said, you should know when you should feel fraudulent. Can you explain that, please?
Where was that?
A few slides back, I wrote a note. It said, you should know when it's okay to feel fraudulent.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of something like that.
Yes. And so that was the I'm trying to go back. I don't remember where it was, but it was in here. So I know which one you're talking about. So oh yeah, here it is. The third bullet point right here. Recognize when you should feel fraudulent.
Yeah.
That is if you're being asked to do a new task. So if you've never worked on a budget before, and your supervisor comes in and they say, hey, we want you to do a $2 million budget plan utilizing X, Y, and Z systems. And we want you to prioritize this budget from A to Z. And you've never done it before, that's okay to feel fraudulent.
Okay.
So recognize when you should feel fraudulent is the novelty situations. If it's new to you, you've never done it before, fraudulent. You be okay with being like, I've never done this before. And so I always like to say, I've never done this before. So full transparency, 10, 11 years ago, they said, hey, Willie, you're gonna be a Title IX coordinator. You're gonna go through Title IX and you're going to adjudicate cases. You're gonna do all of this. I've never done Title IX before. I felt extremely fraudulent going into Title IX, addressing non-consensual sexual misconduct issues. But now 11 years, right? Fast forward 11 years, I'm now doing it with my eyes closed. And so I'm no longer fraudulent. I feel like an expert in the area, right? So when I say recognize when you should feel fraudulent, that is my way of saying, if it's new to you, you've never done it before, be okay with saying, ooh, I don't know, ask for help, ask them to provide you with more information, but it's okay to feel fraudulent in that case. But you should not feel fraudulent if they're asking you to do something that you have already done and you've repeated success. And that's where the imposter phenomenon usually surfaces, is we've already shown that we have great success. We've already shown that we can do everything that they've asked us to do. But as an imposter, we don't feel that we can repeat that success. Does that make sense? I think we're losing Robin. All right, any other questions?
Willie, thank you so much for your presentation. Wanted to get your thoughts on how do you feel about addressing the system that oftentimes I feel often promotes the imposter syndrome? I know personally for myself, oftentimes seeing kind of role models or those who are in quote unquote successful roles and things like that making sacrifices and kind of working crazy hours or other pieces like that, which I think reinforced, a lot of the different feelings that I personally had and what I thought I needed to do to be successful. So what are some of your thoughts on how do we address kind of systematically some of these kind of cultural pieces that set up this whole phenomenon?
Yeah. So it's very tricky because again, it perpetuates a lot of the ideals around professionalism, the ideals of what we need to do to get to the next step of putting in these late hours, being able to do these things. I always like to say, though, it comes with communicating what you're feeling. So if you have a great relationship with your supervisor, okay, this is a big piece. Communicate what you're feeling, allow yourself to be vulnerable, and then establish and set boundaries. So, and I'm going to share, I've been working until 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, putting in, like I got to put my best foot forward. And this is the system, right? And so I've shared with my supervisor, hey, you know what? I'm really trying to go above and beyond because I want to show that I'm putting my best foot forward. I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing it. And I was like, but I need help. And so the ability to ask for help, the ability to set boundaries, and then to limit yourself. So now I'm not here every night of the week. My late nights are Thursdays. So I'm playing within the so hopefully, Kevin, this is answering what you're saying. I'm playing within the confounds of this system of instead of every night, I've now dedicated Thursday night as my late night. I've communicated that I'm feeling overwhelmed. I've asked for help, and I've communicated some vulnerabilities, right? Of like, this is how I'm feeling. One thing, though, that I did not do, and I don't encourage anyone to do, is to communicate feeling like an imposter. When you communicate that you're feeling like an imposter, 9 times out of 10, folks don't hear that. They hear that maybe you aren't ready. And we're not saying we're not ready. We're saying that I want to be seen as the active voice at the table, and I want to be present, but I would just communicate within the structures that you have. And I hope that answered your question. But it has been a very a fine line, a nice song and dance. But it's, again, the people in the system have to be ready to hear it, and some aren't.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. And I'll stick around, but I do believe that there is, who was doing the, Kevin, was that you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Really appreciate your presentation and for you sharing your thoughts with us on this important topic. And definitely we can all resonate with this in some capacity. I also want to draw folks' attention to the chat where there's some information about an assessment for today's session to give your feedback. We'd love to hear from all of you. If you can take a few moments to do so. We also want to invite folks to continue with the different programs that we have offered throughout this month of October for Careers and Student Affairs Month. So there's a link there in the chat as well for all the upcoming events. Hopefully been able to participate in other events, and we'll look forward to seeing you before the end of the month. So thank you all, and thank you, Willie, for your presentation with us today.
Awesome. Thank you all.